The Zarian Research Institute's Containment Lab 7 had seen many specimens over the years, but nothing quite like the dying Deathworlder currently fascinating its most distinguished minds. At least that's what Dr. Kenthmar kept insisting as he adjusted his bioscanner for the 14th time in 20 minutes. "The deterioration rate is unprecedented," he announced to the observation deck, his forearms dancing across holographic displays with the sort of theatrical precision that had made him the Vexathi Collective's most published xenobiologist. "Notice the excessive thermal output. Her core temperature registers at 37.2 degrees. Fatal hyperthermia for most species." Through the reinforced viewing portal, the human specimen lay on what the facility generously called a medical platform. To most observers, she appeared to be dying spectacularly. Rivulets of clear fluid streamed down her flushed skin, while her chest heaved with labored respirations that rattled the atmospheric processors. Every few minutes, she'd emit low, guttural vocalizations that made the Zephyrian analyst Quindal's gill slits flutter with nervous anticipation. "The fluid loss alone should have killed her hours ago," Quindal observed, her translator rendering the clicks and whistles of her native tongue into flat, clinical standard. Yet her cardiovascular system continues operating at what appears to be maximum capacity, remarkable adaptation for a terminal phase. Dr. Kenthmar preened at having his colleagues' agreement. "Precisely my hypothesis. Deathworlder physiology includes redundant systems that activate during fatal trauma. We're witnessing millions of years of evolution designed specifically for spectacular final moments. The human chose that moment to emit another grunting sound and shift position, causing her limbs to flex in what looked like involuntary spasms. The assembled researchers made careful notes about muscle contractions and autonomic responses. "Should we attempt intervention?" asked Pipnon, a junior researcher whose species' natural curiosity often overrode their sense of self-preservation. "The ethical protocols suggest—" "Absolutely not," Kenthmar cut him off, with the authority of someone who'd written extensively on theoretical death-world biology. "Any interference could disrupt the natural process. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to observe authentic Deathworlder terminal behavior." Quindal's head fins twitched in what might have been skepticism. The specimen was reportedly found in this condition during the acquisition operation. According to the field team, she was already exhibiting these symptoms when they encountered her. "Further proof of my theory," Kenthmar declared triumphantly. "She was already in combat-induced system failure when captured. The transition from battle mode to death mode is seamless in apex predator species." The human rolled onto her side and made a series of rhythmic movements that the monitoring equipment interpreted as seizure activity. Her vocalizations increased in frequency, though the universal translator stubbornly refused to parse them into anything resembling language. "Fascinating," murmured Dr. Velthan, the facility's comparative physiologist, as she studied thermal readings. "The heat signature suggests her metabolic processes are actually accelerating rather than shutting down. Most creatures enter hypothermic states during terminal phases." "Deathworlders are different," Kenthmar explained, with the patience of someone addressing particularly slow students. "Their evolutionary strategy involves burning brighter before burning out. Maximum resource expenditure to ensure the predator takes down as many threats as possible before expiring." The human's breathing grew even more labored, and she began making what sounded suspiciously like counting noises. 23, 24, 25. The researchers interpreted this as delirium-induced numerical fixation, possibly related to tracking remaining heartbeats. "The psychological deterioration is accelerating," noted Dr. Yithlek from his position at the neural monitoring station. "Her brain activity shows patterns consistent with hallucination and dissociation from reality." Pipnon raised a tentative appendage. "The vocalization seems structured. Could she be attempting communication?" Unlikely, Kenthmar dismissed. Death throes often include pseudo-linguistic patterns, the brain's desperate attempt to maintain cognitive function while biological systems collapse. Through the viewing portal, the human continued her mysterious rhythmic movements, while her skin grew even more flushed. The monitoring equipment registered heart rates that would have been immediately fatal to any known species except, apparently, dying humans from death worlds. "How long do we estimate before complete organ failure?" asked Dr. Velthan, already calculating research opportunities. Kenthmar consulted his readings with the confidence of someone who'd never actually seen a living human before. "Based on current deterioration rates, I'd estimate 6 to 8 hours before irreversible shutdown. We should prepare immediate preservation protocols." The human chose that moment to flip onto her back and begin moving her limbs in coordinated patterns that looked almost like exercise routines. But that was clearly impossible, given her obviously terminal condition. "The final neural firing patterns are creating motor function illusions," Kenthmar explained. "Her brain is replaying familiar physical activities while her body dies. Quite poetic, really." Quindal's gill slits fluttered again. "Perhaps we should contact Director Zenthal. A specimen this unique requires administrative oversight." "Agreed," Kenthmar nodded. "We'll need authorization for emergency extraction procedures. The opportunity to study intact Deathworlder organs during active system failure is too valuable to waste." As if summoned by their conversation, Director Zenthal's voice crackled through the facility's communication system. "All senior researchers to Conference Room 9. We have a situation developing." The assembled scientists reluctantly tore their attention away from their dying specimen, though several maintained remote monitoring connections. As they filed out, the human continued her mysterious terminal behaviors, apparently unaware that she had become the subject of the most significant xenobiological debate in recent Xerion Institute history. Behind them, monitoring equipment faithfully recorded elevated temperatures, accelerated cardiovascular activity, and extensive fluid secretion from a creature that, according to every expert in the room, should have been dead hours ago. The universe, it seemed, still had a few surprises left for even its most distinguished minds. Conference Room 9 buzzed with the kind of tension usually reserved for impending academic catastrophes or budget cuts. Director Zenthal, whose crystalline exoskeleton reflected the room's harsh lighting in fractured rainbows, stood at the head of the table with what could charitably be called displeasure radiating from every facet. "Explain to me," the director said, her voice carrying the particular edge that made junior staff update their resumes, "how a routine acquisition turned into a diplomatic incident with 3 separate star systems." Commander Yithkol shifted in his chair, the plates of his carapace clicking with what his species considered the equivalent of clearing one's throat. The military liaison had seen combat across 17 sectors, but faculty meetings remained his least favorite battlefield. The extraction team encountered the specimen during what appeared to be her final engagement. He began, consulting his tactical display. She was already in the compromised state we're observing. High thermal output, excessive secretions, labored respiratory function. Standard protocol dictated immediate containment for medical stabilization. Medical stabilization that we've apparently been failing to provide for 18 hours, Zenthal noted. Dr. Kenthmar leaned forward with the eagerness of someone whose entire career depended on this moment. "Director, with respect, the specimen isn't responding to conventional treatment because she's beyond conventional parameters. We're documenting the final stages of apex predator biology. Her systems are operating in emergency overdrive." Through the room's monitoring feeds, they could observe their subject continuing her bewildering displays of terminal activity. She'd moved to what appeared to be rapid vertical movements, her body launching upward repeatedly while producing increasingly vigorous vocalizations. The bioscanners registered cardiac rates that should have induced immediate organ failure. Emergency overdrive, repeated Dr. Vex-Snil, the facility's stress physiologist, whose tentacles writhed with academic skepticism. Commander, exactly what condition was she in during acquisition? Ithkol's mandibles clicked as he accessed battlefield recordings. Target was located in what our xenoarchaeological team identified as a primitive exercise facility. She was engaged in repetitive physical activities that we initially mistook for combat preparation or territorial display. The heat signatures were off the charts, added Lieutenant Zekra, the acquisition team leader whose nervous system still hadn't fully recovered from the experience. We assumed she was entering berserker mode, standard Deathworlder behavior when cornered. On the monitoring screens, the human had transitioned to a new form of distress behavior, rapid horizontal movements across the containment floor. Her fluid loss had intensified dramatically, creating what the atmospheric processors interpreted as a localized weather event. The secretion rate has tripled since initial containment, Dr. Quindall reported, her gill slits flickering as she processed the data streams. At this point, she should be suffering complete dehydration. Yet her cellular activity remains hyperactive. Pippinon, who'd been quietly running calculations, spoke up with the sort of insight that either advanced careers or ended them. What if our baseline assumptions are incorrect? What if this isn't terminal behavior? The room fell silent, except for the persistent hum of monitoring equipment and the distant sound of the human making what could only be described as increasingly energetic noises. Impossible, Dr. Kenthmar declared, though his confidence showed hairline cracks. No known species can sustain these metabolic rates without catastrophic system failure. The energy expenditure alone is apparently sustainable for humans, Commander Yithkol interrupted, studying his tactical readings with growing unease. Our containment protocols assume eventual exhaustion and collapse, but her energy output has been climbing since acquisition. Dr. Vex-Snil's tentacles formed worried knots. The psychological profile shows no signs of panic or distress. Her neural patterns suggest focus, concentration, almost like she's performing a deliberate task. Through the feeds, they watched their specimen complete another series of vertical launches before transitioning to what looked like coordinated limb extensions. The monitoring systems frantically attempted to categorize these movements as seizures, but the precision and rhythm suggested otherwise. I'm recommending immediate intervention, announced Dr. Yithlek from his neural monitoring station. If we're going to preserve any viable tissue samples, we need to act before complete biological breakdown. Lieutenant Zekra's compound eyes registered something that might have been doubt. Sir, permission to review acquisition footage? Something about her behavior pattern seems familiar. Familiar how? Director Zenthal demanded. The movements, sir. They're not random. They follow specific sequences like she's following some kind of protocol. On screen, the human had moved to what appeared to be ground-based activities, supporting her body weight on her arms, while lowering and raising her torso repeatedly. The effort was clearly enormous. Her vocalizations had intensified, and her thermal output was creating visible distortion in the containment chamber's atmosphere. Protocol for what? Dr. Kenthmar asked, though his voice lacked its earlier certainty. I'm not sure, sir, but in my experience, dying creatures don't usually maintain such consistent behavioral patterns. The human's latest activity involved what looked like rapid alternation between standing and crouching positions. Her counting vocalizations had resumed, though the numbers seemed to reset periodically in ways that defied medical logic. The translation matrix keeps trying to parse her utterances, reported communications specialist Venak, but the linguistic patterns don't match any known distress calls or final words from our databases. Because they're not final words, Commander Yithkol said slowly, pieces clicking into place with uncomfortable clarity. Lieutenant Zekra, pull up the acquisition site analysis. What exactly did we find at that location? Sir, the facility contained various mechanical apparatus designed for... Zekra's voice trailed off, as realization struck with the force of a diplomatic crisis. For what, Lieutenant? For voluntary physical stress testing, sir. The room's atmosphere could have been cut with a plasma cutter as the implications settled over the assembled researchers. Their dying Deathworlder specimen might not be dying at all. She might just be extremely inconvenienced. The silence stretched until Pipnon, blessed with either courage or career suicide tendencies, reached across the conference table and activated the universal translation matrix with a soft chime that would echo through xenobiological history. Seriously, does nobody around here believe in proper climate control? And where's the water station? I've been asking for hydration for... The human's voice cut through their assumptions like a plasma torch through academic credentials. Every being in Conference Room 9 experienced what their respective species considered the physiological equivalent of existential dread. Dr. Kenthmar's forearms froze mid-gesture. Quindal's gill slits sealed shut in protective shock. Director Zenthal's crystalline structure actually chimed discordantly. Did she just... Commander Ythkol began. Complain about the thermostat? The human continued, apparently addressing the ceiling sensors. Look, I get that you're probably running some kind of research operation here, but basic amenities would be appreciated. Also, your exercise mat situation is tragic. Do you have any idea how hard it is to do proper cardio on metal flooring? Dr. Vex Niels. Tentacles had knotted themselves into patterns that violated several laws of physics. Exercise. She said exercise. Oh, good. Someone's listening. The human's voice carried notes of relief and mild irritation. I was starting to think you were all dead out there. Listen, I hate to be that guest, but I've been running through my routine for almost 20 hours now, and I could really use some actual equipment. Maybe a proper gym? Some weights heavier than whatever those scanning devices weigh? The feed showed her wiping sweat from her forehead in a gesture so casual it practically radiated contempt for their entire scientific worldview. 20 hours, Dr. Yithlek repeated numbly. She's been exercising for 20 hours. Well, maintaining basic fitness levels, the human corrected. Though I'll admit, without proper equipment, it's been more of an extended warm-up. Your atmospheric composition is interesting, by the way. Higher oxygen content than I'm used to. Makes the cardio almost too easy. Lieutenant Zekra made a sound that his species used to express the cognitive equivalent of system failure. Sir, she's been treating our maximum security containment facility as a substandard gymnasium, the human finished helpfully. And honestly, the customer service has been lacking. No towels, no water bottles, no music system. I mean, I appreciate the ambient monitoring sounds, but they're not exactly motivational. Dr. Kenthmar finally found his voice, though it emerged roughly 3 octaves higher than usual. You're not dying? Dying? From a basic fitness routine? What kind of species do you think? Oh. A pause filled with dawning comprehension. Oh, you've never seen humans exercise before, have you? The translation matrix faithfully rendered what could only be described as amused laughter, a sound that managed to be both musical and terrifying when filtered through xenobiological expectations. You thought I was having some kind of medical emergency? The human continued, her voice carrying notes of delighted disbelief. The sweating, the elevated heart rate, the heavy breathing, you interpreted normal cardiovascular activity as terminal distress. Commander Ythkol's tactical mind started processing implications with the speed of someone realizing they'd made a potentially galaxy-spanning diplomatic mistake. Individual, what exactly were you doing when our acquisition team encountered you? Morning routine, 30 minutes of cardio, some strength training, basic calisthenics. I was about 15 minutes into the warm-up when your people showed up. Honestly, I was curious about what you wanted, so I didn't resist when you brought me here." "Didn't resist," Ithcol repeated. "Well, you seemed so interested in observing, and I needed to finish my workout anyway. 2 birds, 1 stone, though I have to say, kidnapping someone from their local gym is a bit extreme, even for first contact protocols. Dr. Quindal's respiratory system had apparently forgotten how to function." "First contact? You are new to human interaction, aren't you?" The human sounded like she was settling in for a longer conversation. "Let me guess. You've been building theoretical models of human physiology based on incomplete data, and when you finally got a live specimen, you assumed our normal biological functions were pathological because they don't match your baseline expectations." The accuracy of this assessment hit the research team like a diplomatic incident waiting to happen. "The fluid secretion rate alone should have indicated systemic failure," Dr. Kenthmar protested weakly. "Sweat. It's called sweat. Basic thermoregulation for mammals engaged in physical activity. Your species don't have cooling systems." Not like that," Pippinon admitted. "Fascinating. How do you handle extended physical exertion?" "We don't," Dr. Vexnil managed. Another pause, filled with what the translation matrix identified as contemplative silence. "So when you saw me exercising, sweating, breathing hard, maintaining elevated heart rate, you assumed I was experiencing catastrophic biological failure because your species physically cannot sustain what humans consider a light workout." The confirmation hung in the air like an indictment of their entire academic careers. "In my defense," the human added, "your containment chamber really is poorly ventilated for cardio. I've been operating at maybe 5% capacity to avoid overheating your atmospheric systems." 5% capacity. Commander Ithcol felt his carapace plates shifting in ways that suggested his species' equivalent of a cold sweat. "What would 100% capacity look like?" "Oh, you don't want to see that in an enclosed space. Trust me." The implications of that statement settled over the assembled beings like the shadow of a very large, very patient predator that had been playing with its food. "Speaking of trust," the human said, her tone shifting to something that made Commander Ithcol's combat instincts trigger warning signals, "I should probably mention that I've spent the last 18 hours doing more than just maintaining cardiovascular health." Director Zenthal's crystalline structure began resonating at frequencies that indicated severe stress. "What do you mean?" "Well, since I had time to kill, I've been conducting my own little research project. Your facility's security architecture is quite interesting. 17 primary access points, 43 secondary ventilation shafts, and a surprisingly vulnerable central power distribution system." The room temperature seemed to drop several degrees. "I've also been listening to your communications chatter. Did you know your intercom system has acoustic leakage into containment areas? Very educational. Apparently, I'm the subject of what you consider groundbreaking xenobiological research." Lieutenant Zekra's compound eyes began cycling through threat assessment protocols. "Listening to communications? Multitasking. You'd be amazed what you can accomplish during a proper cool-down period. For instance, I now know that Dr. Kenthmar published 17 papers on theoretical Deathworlder physiology without ever actually meeting a human." Dr. Kenthmar's academic composure cracked entirely. "How could you possibly? Your database security is adorable, like watching children play with encryption toys. I accessed your research archives around hour 6, just after my stretching routine." Commander Ithcol felt his species' equivalent of ice water flooding his nervous system. "Accessed our archives? Don't worry, I was selective. Only reviewed materials related to human acquisition protocols, facility blueprints, and staff psychological profiles. Professional curiosity, you understand?" The human's voice carried undertones that suggested amusement, but the kind of amusement that preceded very bad things happening to very confident people. "You're not a random specimen. Ithkol realized. Reconnaissance Specialist Chen Nakamura, Human Colonial Intelligence Division. Though I appreciate being called a specimen, it's been years since anyone underestimated me this thoroughly. Dr. Quindal's gill slits were performing rapid flutter patterns that indicated impending respiratory distress. Colonial intelligence? We've been tracking your acquisition operations across 4 sectors, 17 species cataloged, 43 individuals abducted, and an impressive array of ethical violations that would make the Galactic Ethics Tribunal very unhappy. The monitoring feeds showed Chen stretching casually, but every movement now carried implications that their sensors hadn't been designed to detect. The gym where your team found me? Publicly listed address of a human intelligence safehouse. I was waiting for you. Waiting? Pippinon squeaked. Standard operational procedure when investigating hostile xenobiological research. Allow yourself to be acquired, assess facility capabilities, document evidence, then decide whether extraction or negotiation serves the mission better. Director Zenthal's crystalline facets were now producing harmonics that sounded suspiciously like a requiem. What have you decided? Well, that depends on how reasonable you'd like to be about shutting down your little kidnapping operation. Chen stood up in the containment chamber, and somehow the simple act of reaching her full height transformed the entire dynamic. What had been a medical specimen becoming a diplomatic crisis was now clearly something much more dangerous. I should mention that my extended warm-up routine included testing your containment protocols. The force fields? Impressive against most species. The atmospheric controls? Adequate for conventional physiology. The structural integrity of your walls? Well, let's just say human kinetic capabilities are poorly represented in your theoretical models. Commander Ithkol's tactical displays began running scenarios that all ended with variations of catastrophic facility damage. However, Chen continued, I'm not here to demonstrate human destructive potential. I'm here to offer you a choice. What kind of choice? Director Zenthal asked, though her tone suggested she already knew she wouldn't like the answer. Option 1. You immediately cease all acquisition operations targeting human settlements, delete your research on human physiology, and release detailed records of your activities to appropriate authorities. In exchange, I submit a report recommending minimal sanctions and suggesting that your facility might benefit from legitimate xenobiological collaboration rather than kidnapping. The silence stretched while various species processed the implications of refusing this generous offer. Option 2? Commander Ithkol asked, demonstrating the kind of tactical thinking that had kept him alive through 17 sectors of combat. I finished my workout. Chen smiled, an expression that the translation matrix helpfully tagged as predatory amusement combined with professional satisfaction. And trust me, you really don't want to see what a human looks like at full operational capacity in an enclosed space. I've been very, very gentle with your equipment so far. Dr. Kenthmar found himself staring at monitoring readings that suddenly looked less like medical data and more like tactical threat assessments. How gentle? Put it this way. If I'd been doing actual combat conditioning instead of basic fitness maintenance, your facility would currently be experiencing what we call rapid unscheduled disassembly. The research team sat in the kind of silence usually reserved for funeral services or budget meetings. I think, Director Zenthal said carefully, that option 1 sounds remarkably reasonable. Chen nodded approvingly. Excellent choice, though I do have one final request. Which is, next time you build a containment facility, invest in better gym equipment. Seriously, the lack of proper weights was just embarrassing. As the Zerian Research Institute began the most comprehensive data purge in its institutional history, Chen Nakamura finished her cool-down stretches and prepared to file a report recommending the facility for its surprisingly spacious cardio area. After all, it wasn't every day that a reconnaissance mission doubled as a fitness assessment. The universe, it turned out, still had a sense of humor about the gap between academic theory and practical reality.